back better than ever.
This is video that's been circulating on social media today, purported to be the now 59-year-old Rayful Edmond in an airport, just having been released from prison.
When I spoke to him, he was in the airport.
Well, as you can see, Rayful Edmond is out. That's him at the airport. He's not in witness protection. He's not going under an assumed name. Why would he? America's full of guys, well, not full of, but there's many guys, black, Italian, Hispanic, white, that set many people up to go to prison. In fact, that's how drug cases work. So he's out. He did about 35 years. Tony Lewis got out, his co-defendant, about a year and a half ago.
Rayful Edmond was for a long time a government informant, and his information helped to put other drug dealers here in D.C. behind bars. And yet, guys, when he left prison, he did not do so under an assumed name or in the witness protection program.
Rayful Edmond, back in the late 80s, and their case was one of the iconic poster children cases for crack and crime in the 1980s, especially in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
Our most serious problem today is cocaine, and in particular, crack. Who's responsible? Let me tell you straight out.
Rayful Edmonds.
Who is that?
He's the man your son was working for.
Rayful Edmonds. I never heard of that name.
This is a photograph of Rayful Edmond III at the wedding of one of his sisters, Bernice. The charges come from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Emmanuel Manji Sutton, Rayful's half-brother, one of his street lieutenants. John, known as Johnny Mumford, a cousin who distributed to the street lieutenants. Melvin Melbo Stewart, a courier who transported large quantities of cocaine. Renice Thompson, Rayful's sister, who, with her husband, cut and packaged cocaine for street sale. And another sister, Rachel Edmond, who used a counting machine in the basement of her Maryland house to tally the take.
It's the drugs, the crack, the drugs, the crack.
This is a violent city where children learn about drugs and murder early.
By 1989, the nation's capital had become the murder capital of the country, and cocaine, by my own calculations, accounted for nearly 2% of the U.S. economy.
Police say this rundown apartment complex in inner-city Washington is an open-air market for cocaine and crack. So when a local mosque of Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam offered to send its members to patrol against drug dealers, apartment dwellers agreed, even supplied keys so the Muslims could search apartments and examine people they felt didn't belong. John's.
A bunch of people rushed me, and I closed my eyes, and there were more and more people on top of me. Eventually, I was forced to the ground. I was still holding on to the camera, and at some point, someone was hitting or kicking me in the face, in the eye.
Johns was treated for cuts and a bruised eye. One member of the Nation of Islam was arrested for assault. Abdul Alim Muhammad defended the Muslims.
We're not vigilantes. We are vigilant citizens of this community.
But Washington's mayor, Marion Barry, had a warning.
It's unfortunate that this turned into a violent situation. There's no way we can allow citizens to be judge, jury, and prosecutor.
They were living large. Friends and girlfriends on shopping sprees to the best stores in Georgetown. They dropped $457,000 in one store.
Something had to be done. It looked bad. And in the District of Columbia, Rayful Edmond, Tony Lewis Sr., and a bunch of other people, including quite a few of Rayful's very close family members, like his sisters and his mother, were swept up in an indictment.
Edmond's unsuspecting mother talked at a local restaurant with a friend who had agreed to wear a wire for the prosecution.
You know, like he was going hand-in-hand coming, him and Johnny on the corner, and they was selling, so they was getting it done. Right. And then he just got to see, he just went out on his own.
Just as your business, a corporation, or a well-organized organization, just as you would see in any other business. That's exactly what this is.
And this was one of the main distribution points, Orleans Place in Northeast Washington. Think of it as the base of a corporate pyramid. At the lowest level, mules who could earn up to $1,000 a week bringing bricks of cocaine into the city. Lookouts who got $400 to $800 a week. The street sellers, the best of whom, working on commission, could make $3,000 to $5,000 a week. One step up the corporate ladder, the younger enforcers. For an efficient murder, one young hitman was rewarded with a $50,000 Mercedes. And couriers, who transported large quantities of cocaine from the West Coast. Mid-level management was filled mostly by family members who cut and packaged the drugs, counted the money, oversaw distribution, and managed the street workers. Their salaries, $3,000 to $5,000 a week. And at the top of the pyramid, 24-year-old Rayful Edmond, who, according to the U.S. Attorney, ran the corporation, sold retail, bought wholesale from a member of the infamous Crips gang in Los Angeles, who, in turn, imported his cocaine directly from the Medellin drug cartel in Colombia.
The verdict today in the Edmond drug ring trial in Washington, 24-year-old Rayful Edmond convicted of running a $2 million a week cocaine crime outfit in the nation's capital. The one-time schoolyard basketball star faces a mandatory life sentence now. 10 co-defendants, including friends and relatives, were found guilty on related charges. Security surrounding the trial was unusually tight. Names of the jurors were kept secret even from the judge and lawyers to guard against possible reprisals.
The Rayful Edmond trial is a classic media spectacle, with the defendants being flown in via military helicopter and the anonymous jury sealed by bulletproof glass inside the courtroom to protect them, presumably from what? Rayful Edmond's hit team? Well, he didn't have one.
Only people in the courtroom to be scared of or think all this is for can be the defendants.
The jury found Edmond guilty of a massive drug. Edmond was so powerful and so dangerous, the jury in his trial had to sit behind bulletproof glass, their identities hidden from the public for their own safety.
Can't believe this didn't prejudice the jury, which is not that it would have made a difference. The evidence that Tony Lewis Sr. had helped Rayful turn D.C. into crack city was overwhelming. Tony Lewis Sr.'s primary role was interacting with L.A. gang member Melvin Butler, who was connected to Brian Bennett of L.A., probably the biggest African-American coke dealer ever. And Rayful got life no parole, so did Lewis. And he was found guilty of being responsible for bringing thousands and thousands of kilos into the district.
Following his conviction as a drug kingpin, Edmond was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. But within just days of his arrival, he was back in business.
Now here we come to the point or the lesson of this story, or maybe just something to think about. Rayful Edmond grew up middle class. He was the kingpin. Tony Lewis and a bunch of the other people were poor people in D.C. who saw a money-making opportunity.
You know, my father, first of all, somebody is incredibly accountable and remorseful for the decisions that he made. You know, growing up on Hanover Place, you know, poverty-stricken community, it's not an excuse, but got involved into a criminal lifestyle early in his life and as a boy, and just grew into that. And at 26, he went to prison to pay his debt to society, but he got the sentence of life without the possibility of parole. So this is not about my dad being innocent, but it's about the fact that he was overly sentenced. Not just him, but tens of thousands of black and brown Americans across the country due to draconian federal sentencing.
Rayful had his family doing it. Supposedly, you know, he learned how to sell drugs from his mother and father, who were employed with good federal government jobs and made money on the side selling pills and other stuff.
Boothie Perry is the unlikely matriarch of Washington's most prominent crime family. Before she got locked up, she had a $40,000 a year job in the federal government.
So you got your kids educated, you made sure they went to church, you had a good job, your ex-husband had a good job.
He had a job. He worked for the government.
He worked for the government. You were middle-class people.
Yeah.
He was not raised in the inner city. He lived in the suburbs. Safe place.
Yeah.
How many of your children are in jail?
6.
You had 7 kids and 6 are in jail. You're in jail?
Yeah.
Come on. What happened?
I can't really say, and I think basically I'm in here only because I knew what was going on.
She was a mom to me, but also she was a personal friend to me. So when things, you know, selling drugs, like I told you before, so many things go wrong. People get killed, people lose their jobs, people get strung out, and whenever things go wrong or things don't go right in my life, she was my friend. I go talk to her and tell her about all these things, about what's going on with me, and she knew about all that. And she ended up telling all the things that I told her to an informant on a wiretap, and that made her be part of the conspiracy.
Well, it was more than that. Bootsy admits she once counted her son's drug money, and she accepted a car, a house, and other gifts purchased with his drug proceeds.
My mother always wanted a nice big house, you know, so I wanted to be able to buy that for her. One day she always wanted a Mercedes. I wanted to be able to buy that for her.
So they were a criminal family choosing to be engaged in crime, not because of poverty, whereas I think Tony Lewis Sr. and a lot of their workers, at least in part, were poor people who saw an opportunity.
When Edmond was a child, both his parents sold drugs. The father, allegedly heroin. Bootsy says she sold diet pills and admits she sometimes had Rayful handle the money. But she blames his friends for getting him into the drug trade.
He saw the fast money, or he saw them driving big cars, and he said, hey, man, how did you do this? Or how did you get this? Yeah.
For money.
Yeah, of money, or greed. Just say greed. I'd say greed.
This is your watch.
Yeah, it used to be my watch.
Used to be your watch.
Yeah.
The government now has its watch.
Yeah, the government own it now.
How much did this watch cost?
Oh, close to $100,000.
Is it typical of what you would buy when you were...
Typical thing that I would buy when I was home.
Well, you were fancy.
Yeah, I was real jazzy. Yeah, I like, you know, try to have a lot of class.
Did you wear a lot of diamonds on your person?
I just had 1 carat. I just had a 10-carat diamond ring, a 3 carat for my ear, and just a diamond chain and master watch.
Very simple.
Yeah, just, you know, simple, but...
Rayful's still in prison despite telling, as everyone knows, and we're going to get to that part. Tony Lewis Sr. just got out. He did a long time, but he got in prison and he decided to rehabilitate himself. His son became a big community activist. In fact, he was the one interviewed about the whole D.C. situation when American Gangster did the Rayful Edmond special. But Rayful Edmond wasn't rehabilitating himself, at least in the beginning of his sentence. He was trying to sell more dope, which is what he did from his Lewisburg prison cell.
Thrown in with criminals like Osvaldo Trujillo Blanco, or as Edmond knew him, Chicky, a convicted drug felon.
He had a high-profile case. I had a high-profile case. So, you know, we were just wanting somebody to introduce us. We were waiting for a person to come along and say, this Chicky, this Ray. Just about everybody inside the jail in some way, shape, form, or fashion is dealing in drugs, either directly or indirectly.
He also masterminded the shipment of more than 2 tons of cocaine and crack from the coca fields of Colombia to the District of Columbia.
In some ways, he's like the Babe Ruth of crack dealers.
Eric Holder, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, was, until recently, the top prosecutor in Washington, D.C. It was his office that locked Edmond up in the first place. Tell us the magnitude of his operation from inside the prison.
If you look at it on a monthly basis, he was exceeding that which he did when he was running what, to that time, had been the largest drug operation in Washington, D.C. history.
He was doing more from in prison? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, at its maximum, he was doing about 400 kilograms of cocaine per month while in prison, and while on the street, he was doing about 300 at its maximum.
Edmond says it was easy to do from behind bars.
I think it's much easier than when you're on the street.
Easier than on the street?
Much easier because you're right there with the people that have direct access to the narcotics that you need. Colombians, Cubans, Mexicans.
All thrown in together?
All thrown in together.
Thrown in with criminals like Osvaldo Trujillo Blanco, or as Edmond knew him, Chicky, a convicted drug felon.
He had a high-profile case. I had a high-profile case. So, you know, we were just wanting somebody to introduce us. We were waiting for a person to come along and say, this Chicky, this Ray. And we just gonna go from there. It was right there. What else? You know, what else could we do? It's right there.
Chicky is cocaine royalty, son of Griselda Trujillo Blanco, better known as the godmother of the Colombian drug underworld, and a founding member of the notorious Medellin drug cartel.
So they were a criminal family choosing to be engaged in crime, not because of poverty, whereas I think Tony Lewis Sr. and a lot of their workers, at least in part, were poor people who saw an opportunity. Now, Rayful's still in prison despite telling, as everyone knows, and we're going to get to that part. Tony Lewis Sr. just got out. He did a long time, but he got in prison and he decided to rehabilitate himself. His son became a big community activist. In fact, he was the one interviewed about the whole D.C. situation when American Gangster did the Rayful Edmond special. But Rayful Edmond wasn't rehabilitating himself, at least in the beginning of his sentence. He was trying to sell more dope, which is what he did from his Lewisburg prison cell. This time his plug wasn't another black male, but a Colombian, the son of Griselda Blanco, Chiqui.
Remember, he used to live in 18th Street.
Yeah.
That he was going to move to downtown to 16th Street.
Yeah. When he made that statement to me, he was letting me know that the price went down 3,000. It went from 19th Street to 16th Street. So I automatically knew what he was talking about.
Edmond used an entirely different code when he spoke to his distributors back in Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, he used Pig Latin.
You want to hear a little bit?
Yeah, I want to hear what you'd say. What did you say?
Oh, I was just saying, I feel good today.
So fast. You could do that.
You got to be fast so nobody will understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you could just do this whole interview like that?
Yeah, I could do the whole interview like that.
Now, what kind of money were you making out of this?
I wasn't making the money that I should be making, but I was getting 5,000 here, 10,000 there, which is good money for somebody that's in jail and doing time.
So in prison, Rayful orchestrated the shipment of more dope into D.C. than he did when he was on the streets, courtesy of the new friends he made in Lewisburg. Eventually, the feds made a case on Ray, probably figured he had nothing to lose, maybe hoped he could make enough money to buy his way out of prison somehow. But he did, in the end, when they got caught, have something to gain by making a deal with the government. He called people on the jail phone, set up cocaine deals with Colombian suppliers who were actually feds. Bunch of people got long sentences. That's what everybody in D.C. hates him for. It was good money for anyone. $200,000 in 2 years collected for him by associates on the outside. But the money flow was disrupted when Chiqui was gunned down in a Medellin nightclub. But only temporarily, because Edmond quickly struck up with another inmate, this time from the Cali Cartel. Freddie Aguilera was serving 60 years with no parole, just a cell block away. And you hook up with another Colombian.
Yeah. Like I told you, the temptation, you got people every day, different people coming to me trying to hook up drug deals. And this is something that I can do and I know how to do. So it was just hard to say, no, I don't want to be involved in it when I can just say, okay, let me set this deal up and give me a quick $20,000 or $30,000.
Prison authorities never did figure out what Edmond was up to, but the FBI and local police here in Washington, D.C. did, thanks to a tip from a jailhouse informant.
But not only did he do that then, for 20 years, so up to maybe 10, 12 years ago, he was still clearing homicides. Cavario talks about in his book, Young Gangsters and Old Guns, how Alpo worked for many, many years going to trials in different cities, not about things he knew about or that he was involved in, but as an expert witness. I was once a drug kingpin, so I can attest to if they were talking this type of way on the phone, this is what it means, this is how a drug operation works. Rayful Edmond was doing the same thing, but he's out, he's only 59. I think he's younger than, I think Meech will be about that age when he gets out next year. I mean, he's good, he looks healthy, could have many years ahead of him. It'll be interesting. Alpo, of course, famously couldn't keep away from Harlem. Alpo got back into selling DOPE when he was found DEAD. He had bundles of the H on him, and it was known he was doing that. I don't think Rayful Edmond will do that, but Rayful told on a lot of people in D.C. I don't think he's going to go there, but he'll be somewhere. I'm sure he'll be doing interviews. We may see him on Vlad soon. I mean, I'd interview him just because he's so famous. Rayful Edmond, one of the symbols of the 1980s, just like YBI in Detroit and different people in New York, Alpo, of young, charismatic guys, many of whom didn't grow up poor. They just chose to get into drugs, or they were born into hustler criminal families like Rayful was. His whole family was solid middle class in D.C., chose to get into the game, made a lot of money very briefly, got a very long prison term. But D.C. was falling apart before and after Rayful Edmond.
From what I've been reading in the newspaper and seeing in the news, Washington, D.C. is worse than it was when we was out on the street, so how could it be us?
A lot of my friends from my neighborhood lost their lives because I brought drugs in the community. You know, the people dying.
Crack babies?
Some baby probably was going from crack because of me. Yeah, I feel bad about it now, but back there, you know, I was just thinking about the power.
In fact, the homicide rate peaked and stayed at that peak after Rayful Edmond. I mean, he went down in about 89. DC's homicide rate stayed extremely high till like 96, and its peak rate happened after Rayful.
Now, many years later, his petition to be released from prison early has been granted. Jason Downs has been Edmond's attorney for the past 7 years.
He feels that he has served, and we believe that Mr. Edmond has served and paid his debt to society.
Let's give the man a chance. Yeah, he did some terrible things occur that he was a part of. But we're talking about 33 years ago.
Mr. Parker says Edmond seems remorseful and told him he wants to now give back to the community.
Bob, I'm looking to take help from anybody that I would think they could help to stop the killing. I cannot afford to have selective morality. He's done his 33 years, and he deserves a second chance.
Interesting. Rayful Edmond's out. Tony Lewis is out. They served a long time. Griselda Blanco's one living remaining son was on one of those cartel reality shows. Of course, El Chapo's wife has been. I predict Rayful he had a good personality, smart guy. He'll probably enter into the pop culture, so be prepared for Rayful Edmond movie interviews or something. Al Prophet, American Dope.